Okay, welcome to the first installment of 100 Pictures of Honey, a new reading series that is named after a line from a poem by Jack Gilbert called The Forgotten Dialect of the Heart, which is one of my favorite poems. That poem deals with both the power of language and its inability to really translate human experience. And so I thought that's the perfect name for a reading series, has to come from this poem. So we're so glad you're here to hear our three readers tonight: John McCarthy, Rachel Bunting, and Darren Femory, who are wonderful writers who I'm very lucky to also count as friends. Just a few little housekeeping notes before we begin. I recognize pretty much everybody's name, so I'm not going to go into a big speech about being appropriate, but please remember to stay muted while the readers are reading. Use the chat to put a line you love, encourage the readers, use the reactions. Sometimes the readers like to have gallery view on, so they can see all of you. Do whatever you like to support our people who are reading tonight. I am going to drop in the chat. We are new, right? We're a new series, so I'll drop in the chat right now all of our social media handles, which is where you'll be able to follow us to find who's coming next and links for the readings. This video will be, besides the welcome video, the first video that goes up on our YouTube channel. And I say we, like I'm some big conglomerate reading series. I am paying my readers in this series, and although they're going to get paid regardless, if you would like to support the series, I'll put the link up again at the end to PayPal, for me, then I will in turn pay our readers. I think it's important for people to be respected for their time and their work. They're not getting a lot, but it's something. So to that end, we're gonna begin. I put these three people together not just because they're friends and I thought they would say yes to a new reading that no one had tried before, but also because all three of them, although their writing is very unique in style and form, all three of them deal with very specific physical geography in their poems. John's Southern Illinois, Rachel's New Jersey Pine Barrens, Darren's Ohio, and also very similar emotional landscapes of memory, time, family, trauma, and loss. And I think that you'll hear tonight, although they're very different, how well their work speaks to the other work. So we are going to get to why you're all here, and we're going to begin with John McCarthy. So I'm going to drop John's bio and a link to his, that is the wrong one, sorry. John's bio and a link to his book in the chats. This is the part where I take a minute to get this right. There we go. And I just wanted to say a couple of words before John begins reading. One of the things I love about John's poetry is its immediacy. The way that it takes me as a reader into the poem right away as sort of a ghost bystander. Even if these experiences are very far from my own, I always feel in John's poems like I am there in the moment. And John's also a master of kind of this oxymoronic tender violence or violent tenderness, one or the other or both. I think his poems are brilliant, and I think you're going to think they are too. So John, I turn the screen over to you.
Thank you, Donna. Donna is a wonderful friend and colleague who I've had the pleasure of hosting the Rhino Forum with Rhino Magazine. It's the public outreach arm of Rhino Magazine for a couple of years now. So this is a really exciting opportunity to kick off what is going to be a wonderful reading series, Donna. So thank you for bringing us all together here on a Thursday night. And Rachel and Darren, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to reading with you and hearing what you have to read as well. I will read, I think I have 5 poems that I'll read for you, and I'll read 2 from the book Scared Violent Like Horses, which, if I have to give you an elevator pitch, I think Donna summed it up quite nicely, but I suppose that it is about familial trauma and toxic masculinity in the rural Midwest. So I will begin with a poem called Until I Learn That Please is the Color of a Bruise. Made from his hands, Chris aims a gun at me. You're dead, he says, but I don't like being the dead one, so I take off running. The chasing lasts a long time. We snag our sleeves in the tops of chain link cyclone fences until the chasing becomes a way to see how far we can explore. Climb and run, the unbraiding of back alleys and empty lots until we end up on an acreage of private property with our own privacy and no one else around. Chris corners me under an old lean-to where a sun-damaged cigarette boat is living out the rest of its existence on top of an old hitch trailer. Here, Chris forces me to play punch for punch until I beg, please stop. Until I learn that please is the color of a bruise, skin swollen and purple on the side of my throbbing arm. Everything is swollen when it starts raining. We roll our pant legs up and walk home through the wet grass. My soaked shoes as I walk are like a feeling knotting up inside my stomach that I can't quite explain. This is how you stay friends when you're poor, Chris says. Our whole summer was like this. When we couldn't see that far into the future, every day was the same. It was nice, the way we could handle a little bit of pain and return to it again, day after day. The next poem I will read is the title poem from the book. I think that is an appropriate, apt poem to read. Scared, violent, like horses. I was too young to call him a friend, but I had a classmate once who snuck up behind a horse, and now his body is made of a long time ago. He has the quiet space in memory where he never sat next to me again. Back then, anyone I ever called a friend held fire in their fists when they talked to me. Their fists were dingy, grime-covered, and grease-slick, as if they were made of horsehair, as if they were untamed and lonely, galloping and wind-swollen. We didn't know how to talk about loss, so we made each other lose. We went to fields to see who could take the most damage. We went to fields that smelled like the boy who became an empty space on a Tuesday morning a long time ago. Now, because I am scared of time and how it moves, I look down at my fists that didn't always want to, but have hit so many friends that the broken knuckles look like bruised magnolias. Listen to me, please. When I knock or bang on the table or door and beg for attention, please. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness. I don't know how to let anything go. I don't know how to say anything else about the boy who had a buzz cut and a flat head, the boy who was kicked in the face by a horse and died looking up at the sky. The boy's father must have found his son with a crushed face, and while running back to the house with his own son in his arms, must have said something raging and spiteful to God. This memory is my starting point when I think backward and apologize for all our fists coiled tight as key rings. How could we not break the mirror we look at in the morning? How could we not swing at the different versions of our faces staring back between the fissures? The hurt and mangled parts of us loved the blood-dried brown on our skewball knuckles, and we had nightmares of being reined in. We needed someone to help us change. We needed someone to force us into confronting the uselessness of violence. But no one came, and our fists swelled, unbridled and restless, wild and afraid. I will read one more poem from Scared, Violent, Like Horses. So I grew up Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but there's a little bit of an undertow theme that threads that book, because regardless of whether or not I'm Catholic, I carry a profound sense of guilt and shame throughout my life that I can't quite explain or ever set down. So this poem is called Confirmation. You taught me how hands could be laid, how they could touch a head and heal, but all of those hands eventually fell limp like a field bent by threshing or a lit match dropped in water. Once, we used to dance in the corner tavern's neon light where the pickup exhaust wafted inside like harvest dust. Life in the Midwest is like one long goodbye because life is the same every day. And I didn't realize you had left until there was nothing but hard work and long days, ending with the wind's silent dirge that sounds like trying not to die, but always dies in smaller ways. Screen doors that slam shut, but don't shut all the way because the house is settled and the roof is warping from the sky, boiling over with thunder and rain. I wake up now to the flashing falling from the gutters and the water dripping through the holes in the ceiling. All I do is recall your voice like a prayer, thrashing my skull that minds the night, begging our fathers, our fathers, our fathers in prayer. But they are off begging other women in other towns. This town is not the memory I want, but I know how sadness works. It's like a kettle bottom falling into the details of every thought. I shouldn't have, but I stayed in town to try and keep what I love alive, but no, that never works. We were a long time ago, and a long time ago is too hard to get back. The last time we talked, you said, we will end up like our mothers, waiting for nothing. Then you didn't come back. No, not ever. So that's it from Scared Violent Like Horses. And for those of you who joined post banter or during pre-reading banter, we were graced with a wonderful rendition of Dolly Parton's 9 to 5. And there's also a, The Great Resignation is the thing that's ongoing now. And so I don't want to preface these poems too much other than I will say, kill the 40-hour work week, kill the 8-hour work day, and universal basic income and healthcare for all. This poem is called Putting in 2 Weeks. I got an aunt who still loves me out west, and she sent me some mailbox money, which I had to get rid of right away by buying you some gas station roses in this keychain town we call home. Today is my birthday, so I took off work early because every day is a half day if you just stand the fuck up and leave. It's my birthday, and if work is gonna make me suffer, then I'd rather suffer with you or at a table of friends than at a boardroom table of capitalists. You ask me how I wanna celebrate, and I say, invite all of our friends to a fire. Tell them to tell their friends, and we'll just keep adding to the fire until the land we're on doesn't belong to anyone anymore. You and me, we can renew our vows too, like we did down at the Beehive in Buncombe, when a stranger named Grasshopper Eyes pronounced us hillbilly and sweetheart and forced a shot of Rayo whiskey upon us and said, cheers to living where you mean something. You see, love, you don't have to work all that hard to be happy. In fact, you'll be happier. When you ask what I would do with so much leisure, I'd start by worrying less about a goddamn bedtime, because I still would have enough time to get everything I wanted to get done. I just have to use my hands a little bit more. I think that's innovation. We don't need a phone or a camera. We just need a couple mornings to enjoy the sunlight that pours through our curtainless windows, overlooking the silver maples we planted. Don't get me wrong. I like to let the world in so long as it doesn't stay too long. Because love, I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for something so good and brief, only the wind can tell you more about it. Only the fields of wheat will remember, the same fields we take turns painting, trying to capture their holy color gold as they flinch and knock about in the excited air. And I will read, I'll read one more. And this poem is, again, aptly titled, Pursue Leisure, Abolish Work. And it contains lines from the East Virginia Blues as performed by Nick Shoulders and the Ozark Highballers. I want to sleep when I'm dead too, but I also want to sleep now. And I also want you, darling, and I want to resist reaching into my pockets for symbols of my labored body to purchase things that I can build myself. I don't want to buy convenience because I know how to make it by not doing anything. Oh, darling, let's mollycoddle each other until our names slip off of us like unwrapped ribbon. Let's hold our bodies against each other effortlessly and become as priceless as air. Oh, sweetheart, I don't want your greenback dollars. I don't want your watch and chain. I just want your love down in some secret hollow where time is not its paper counterpart, where we can downshift away from commodity and productivity and posting these images of our bodies to be bartered by strangers. Oh, sweet angel, I'm wide awake among the rocks and trees and creatures of so many shapes and sizes. Please don't go and love another or try to measure what we'd be worth. Please take me back and let's make every day a weekend. Let's make every day as joyous as the high note of a fiddle and a yodel. Let's make the sounds of two people skipping town in August. Oh, moonlight, please take me back like a porch light left on. Oh, sunshine, let me show you what the world can look like if we run away, a bright hill in the afternoon and no reason to go anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Wow. I love the new work. I know one of John's newer poems also just was were you a finalist for the Neruda Prize? Is that correct? Yes. So I'm looking forward to this new work becoming a book because I love Scared Violent Like Horses so much, and I think this one's going to be even more great work from you. So thank you so much, John, for kicking us off. Our second reader is going to be Rachel Bunting. I'll pop her official bio along with a link to the wildlife organization where she works in the chat. If you are so inclined and want to support Rachel, that is a place that's near and dear to her heart, and you can check it out. I've known Rachel for a long time as a writer and even more as a friend. We do our yearly little writing vacations together, and we've gotten to know each other's work pretty well over the years. One of the things that I love the most about Rachel as a writer in both her poetry and her prose is that she has this ability to render both the beauty and the dread of living at the same time, and often without leading the reader or the listener to knowing which is which, and which way is up. And she never tells the reader how to feel, but the reader always feels when they read Rachel's work. And so I can't wait for you to hear, and I'll let her tell you a little bit about what she's going to read, but I can't wait to hear her read this piece, and I know you're going to love it too. Rachel, screen is yours.
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, Donna stole what I was going to say, which is we've been friends and workshop buddies for a long time. Donna is probably one of my most trusted readers when I'm working on something new. So thank you for that. John, I don't know how I'm going to follow that. That was brutal and awesome. So thank you. All right. So I'm working on, at this point, a memoir that focuses on family trauma and my work as a volunteer at a wildlife hospital. And so what I'm going to read tonight is a piece that sort of braids two of those things together. Fear is a rabbit. My mother is a nurse. She's worked in many specialties: emergency, organ donation and transplant, intensive care, neonatal intensive care. She spent a number of years working for a private corporation where she uses her nursing background to assist in the coordination of international emergency evacuations. She also spent time working for an organization that provides court-appointed advocates for children. She dedicated decades of her life to the art and science of healing. She is good at this work, has a brilliant mind that can process information quickly and craft a plan of action that is accurate, efficient, and effective. She's been witness to moments of incredible vulnerability for so many people, held the trust of these people in her hands. My maternal grandmother died before I turned a year old. My mother was 26, her mother 53. What did my mother know of the world? What did she have left to learn? She told the same stories about her mother so often they are etched in my own memory, as if I myself had seen her standing at the kitchen counter, rolling out a pie crust, a cigarette with a long ash dangling from the corner of her mouth, as if I knew the sound of her laughter, understood the ache of losing it. But memory is malleable, unreliable, a lace of delicate neural connections, susceptible to alteration, breakage, and repair. When I was 16, my mother dropped me off at the salon before a school dance and told me she'd be back to pick me up. I sat in the stylist chair as she wound my hair around the barrel of a curling iron, then pinned it up in a loose knot. I sat in a chair in the waiting area for 45 minutes, admiring the grown-up reflection in the mirror across from me and wondering when my mother would come back inside to find me. When the salon phone rang and the receptionist told me my mother was waiting in the parking lot, I realized my mistake. My stomach tightened. I could feel the storm building as I walked to the car. On the drive home, she let loose her anger like hurricane wind. How could I be so selfish? I should have known she'd wait in the parking lot, and now I'd kept her waiting for an hour. Didn't I ever think of anyone but myself? At home, she retreated to her office, refused to come out and meet the shy boy who had nervously asked me to be his date only 2 weeks before. At the wildlife hospital, I hang up the phone and cross the kitchen to the basement door. Renee, Kelsey, and Fiona are down there, occupied with some dark, difficult task that involves a young deer who arrived yesterday but didn't live through the night. I don't venture beyond the top of the stairs. I call down to them instead. Can one of you come up? We have an adult rabbit coming in from the parking lot that needs assessment. Be there in a minute, Renee calls back over the distinctive sound of a small saw. I close the door against it. In the reception area, a man in a heavy field coat stands on the far side of the glass divider. His baseball cap is pulled low over his eyes. The bottom half of his face is covered by a gray mask. He holds a large Amazon box in his hands. During our brief phone conversation, the man told me he'd let his dog out into the backyard and watched as he headed straight for the new wire fencing around an area of the yard the man was trying to reseed. The dog loved that patch of yard, dug there so often that no grass would grow. The fence was meant to keep him out. The man saw him nosing one particular area and went to investigate. That's when he found the rabbit trapped in the wire. She was scared, breathing heavily. It took the man 10 minutes to free her. He had to cut the wire away. I explain our COVID protocol. He should leave the box on the floor of the lobby, step outside so I can retrieve it. He'll be able to come back in as soon as I return to my side of the glass divider. The box is light. I'm always surprised by how light the animals are. As I walk into the kitchen, I hear the man step inside again. At the exam table, I pull a large plastic bin off the floor, line it with a fluffy towel, then open the Amazon box to take a look at the rabbit. After her mother's funeral, my mother vowed she would never speak to her father again. There were stories about him too, stories that brought an oily skin of fear and anger to her voice. Once he sat in the kitchen holding my brother on his knee while he contemplated a single bullet on the table. There had been, he said, entirely too much crying that day. But she did speak to him again, allowed him to be a grandfather. I remember eating broccoli off the stem from the garden behind his house, hearing him talk about driving out to the Great Salt Lake, riding in the front seat of his old pickup truck. These memories are blurry, sun-bleached, so vague I can't quite place myself in them. Eventually, though, the tension became untenable, their tempers erupting like twin volcanoes too many times. By the time I reached middle school, my grandfather was a small dark shadow in the back of a closet we rarely opened. Decades later, I saw photographs of him on the wall at my aunt's house, in his Marine Corps uniform, on a fishing trip, in a suit on the day of his wedding. I was surprised at how like him my mother looked. I married Todd when I was 18 after a year of dating. He was 22, handsome and attentive, with a family that seemed genuinely pleased to see me each time I visited his house. Before the wedding, my mother told me I was confusing sex with love. She told me I couldn't possibly understand what it meant to be in love. She asked me if I thought he made me a better person, because that's what love does. I said yes, and her voice turned acidic. I must have been a much worse person than she thought, because anyone could see I was nothing worth bragging about. When Todd and I divorced after 7 years, we had a house to sell and a 2-year-old son to share. My mother said she was right. This proved it wasn't real love because it didn't last. The rabbit is large and beautiful, with long ears and dark, impassive eyes. Both rear legs are wrapped in homemade bandages, paper towels secured with medical tape, and there is blood seeping through. Her fur is thick, a soft brown mottled with white, the perfect picture of a rabbit. I reached in slowly. She pulls her head back in response to my hands, but doesn't move any further. As I slide my hands beneath her, I note a large wound on her back. The fence skinned her, exposing the bright red muscle. It looks like an angry mouth slashed into the middle of her body. I place her carefully in the plastic bin, then set a lid studded with holes on the top. When I return to reception with the man's Amazon box, he asks eagerly, "How does she look?" I smile at him before remembering he can't see my face behind the mask. I make sure my voice is soft, reassuring, as I begin reciting the script I've been trained to deliver. "She looks okay," I say evenly. "I've transferred her to one of our enclosures, so I'm giving you your box. We'll let her rest for a bit, as being handled, even for just a few moments, can be really stressful for the animals. After a little while, one of our staff members will do a full exam to determine the extent of her injuries and a treatment plan." The man looks anxious. "Don't worry," I tell him. "We'll get her the help she needs." I return to the kitchen where Renee is pulling a fresh pair of nitrile gloves from a box on the wall. Grab another towel, she says. I need your help with this one. What happened? She nods at the bin. The lid is set at a wrong angle. She's already peeked inside. She finishes fitting the gloves onto her hands, then lifts the rabbit, towel and all, onto the table as I recount the man's story. I was visiting my brother in California when Todd called. We were already divorced, and there was a new brittleness to our interactions as we renegotiated our custody agreement. Before I could say more than hello, Todd yelled that my parents, who agreed to watch our son for the first 2 days of my trip, were refusing to turn him over for the remainder of my time away. It took an hour and a half to reach my mother, who told me that our son, who loved his father, who was always eager to see him, didn't want to go. He cried and cried, she said, and how could she do that to him? She hung up the phone, refused to answer again. I don't usually assist with intakes. This task is typically reserved for more senior volunteers and staff members for good reason. Intakes are unpredictable. An injured animal will go to great lengths to keep a human from touching it. I've seen this plenty of times. A black vulture with a compound wing fracture snapping at the wrist of a volunteer who stepped too close. A raccoon with a broken leg scampering off the exam table, headed for a nearby shelf where there was a hiding spot behind some supplies, hissing and spitting the whole way. Even a rabbit can do some damage with a well-placed bite. These things happen even after an animal has been in care for several weeks, but the likelihood of injury to the animal or the human is highest during intake when all parties are still assessing the danger of the situation. But no one else is around. Fiona and Kelsey are still working in the basement. Vinny and Bennett are outside cleaning up the grounds. I take a deep breath in an attempt to steady my nerves, then follow Renee's instructions to wrap the towel around the rabbit, covering her head, and hold her in place on the table. My parents never hit me. They reminded me of this every time they scolded me. Are we terrible parents? My mother would ask. Do we beat you? I never knew how to respond to this. It was a trick, a question that demanded 2 answers, but she only wanted one. I learned quickly to be invisible while my mother was cleaning, often disappearing into the basement after I finished my own assignments to reread my favorite books and listen to the sound of the vacuum overhead. One week, well after the vacuum stopped running, I climbed the steps from the basement, headed to the kitchen for a snack. I was standing in front of the refrigerator, scanning the shelves, when my mother re-entered the room with a snap in her voice. Couldn't I see that she just swept the floor, that I tracked dirt all over, and now she'd have to do it again? Her anger kept coming. I was suddenly drowning in a river with a strong current, struggling to keep my head above the water. Renee begins to snip with a small pair of scissors at the medical tape binding the paper towel to the rabbit's legs. She twitches uncomfortably once, then stills again, her flank rising and falling heavily. Slowly, the tape loosens and the paper towel falls away. Renee peels it back to reveal dark gashes, more skinned muscle on both rear legs. She separates the toes on each foot, flushing the fur with saline and peering quietly at the cuts there. The rabbit, still breathing heavily, remains otherwise motionless. See here, Renee says, holding the toes apart. She must have really been tangled up in that fence. You can see where the wire cut into her toes. The fur there is dirty, matted with blood. And here, now she points to the exposed muscle on the rabbit's legs. This is what happens when they try to squeeze out. The wire is too tight and pulls their skin right off. I wince. There's another one on her back, I say, another big cut. I loosen my grip on the hand towel and Renee lifts it slowly, just enough to see the cut. She inhales sharply. Oh yeah, that's a bad one. She gestures for me to release the towel entirely. In one quick motion, she sweeps the rabbit into her arms and flips her over so her belly is exposed, a smooth, uninterrupted expanse of soft white fur. She strokes the rabbit's head while rocking back and forth and talking quietly to her. The rabbit's breathing evens out. Her eyes seem to relax. Renee murmurs quietly, "Yes, you're a beautiful girl. I'm so sorry, beautiful girl." She looks at me and nods. She doesn't have to explain. If we trace the thread of anger back through the years, how far would we travel? certainly the 40 years of my lifetime. Through my mother's, her father's, I know now that most of my choices in life were not choices, but reactions, an attempt to increase the distance between myself and my mother. I have always wanted to bear as little resemblance to her as possible. It seems to me that she delights in cruelty. We haven't spoken since 2013. I don't remember the contents of our last exchange. This is true of most of our verbal interactions. She is adept at steering conversations so that I end up feeling disoriented, lost, uncertain how I came to be sitting in this chair at this moment. I was 30 before I heard the term gaslighting. It was another few years before I understood that's what was happening to me. By the time I decided to see a therapist just before I turned 40, I felt like a clenched fist all the time. I didn't know how many layers of grief and anger I'd need to remove before I felt like a human instead of a wounded animal. I still don't know. I moved the bin closer to Renee so she can place the rabbit back inside, then turned to look for the bottle of isoflurane and cotton balls. I've seen this happen hundreds of times over the past year. I'm generally unmoved by it. Animals arrive daily with injuries too severe to treat. I know that every exam assesses the potential for long-term recovery and quality of life. I've seen the telltale sign of euthanasia, a bin with a towel draped over it, more times than I can count. But I've never been part of the equation before, never a participant in the process. I hand over the bottle. Renee drenches 3 cotton balls in the chemical, then drops them into the bin. I pull the lid back onto the bin, then slip the towel over it. I catch one final glimpse of the rabbit's dark eyes before she disappears behind the towel.
Wow. Thank you so much, Rachel, for that. Brilliant. I mean, people were putting parts in the chat that just really stood out to them. There's too many places to stand out. I love your description of memory in this piece, and the way you pull everything together at the end. Just masterful. I know that Rachel started her most of her writing as a poet, but I think we're all going to be very excited when this memoir comes together, and going to someone for sure is going to read it. One of the links that I posted earlier for Rachel was another one of the essays that she's been working on in the memoir, that's up at Hippocampus. And then there is actually a third one that's up at Entropy. So if you want more of that wonderful work that Rachel is doing right now with her prose, you can find those pieces online. And we're going to get then to our very last leader, last but not least, is Darren Femory, and I'll put his bio and links in the chat. Darren's work is, Darren is prolific. You'll read in his bio, he is the author of 15 books currently, I believe, and wide ranging. I think that's one of the things I'm always looking forward to in Darren's work, whether he's taking on climate change or politics or the opioid crisis and addiction, or relationships. His Emily As poems to his wife are some of my favorite love poems being written today, and I think he's going to read a couple of those tonight, at least I hope. And in his latest book, Parenting, taking on the idea of speaking to his children in a way that will resonate with them, I think, for a very long time now and when they're older. But his spare and honest work always resonates with me, and I can't wait to hear what he's going to share with you tonight. So Darren, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Rachel. Thank you, John. This was my first time getting to hear the two of you read. I'd read some things before because I got curious before tonight, and I'd come across John's work. I think I was the person that requested it for the Columbus Library System. So, but it was exciting to hear it live, and thank you for. The bunny thing was starting to get to me at the end there, especially, and it was fantastic. So I'm going to start tonight by reading some poems from the new book. Not too old at this point, only a month or so. A Child Walks in the Dark. from Harbor. And as Donna said, these poems are all sort of missives to my children, written when I had two, a son and a daughter. And so they're all addressed to the children, or I told my son, or I told my daughter. And I'm going to read 5 of these tonight, which have all very quickly become my favorites. And anytime I get a chance to read these, I've been doing so. Those junk plums. I told my children those junk plums left at the bottom of the grocery bag were not perfect when we put them in the bag, but they were on sale and good enough for a family that doesn't get many plums now that they're mangled and losing their juice to the bottom of the thin green bag I struggled so mightily to remove from the dispenser. We are still going to cup their mangled flesh in our hands. We are still going to eat them, however inelegant that might be. We are going to pour the remnants into a tiny cup. We are going to celebrate the fact that there is still fruit in this world. That won't always be the case. For anyone who's ever had or raised a young boy, as they come in and out of art and come in and out of adrenaline and enthusiasm for different things, it's always wild. And Donna, you and I had a conversation about this in terms of music, and this poem always, when I think about our conversation, is the one that comes to mind. There is enough youth. I told my son, there's enough youth in you for all of us. Of course, you can paint the wall with your helmet on while you stand on the bookshelf and sing your favorite lines from Under Pressure, which you learned from an animated movie where a koala sacrifices his whole past for one night of good art, which yields him ruin and more art. And you, boy, I don't know why you got naked to do all of this, but I suppose it does make sense to me on an elemental level. Son, you are the new element, some sort of fleshy stone that hums at a rhythm this family has not yet known. Yes, 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 you're right. David Bowie in Queen. It's all so incredible. Next, I want to read a short one. This is maybe the shortest poem in the book, but it makes me just super happy. It's called You're a Witch. I told my son, you're a witch if you want to be, but do your best to be a good witch. And if you find the right dark magic, please don't tell me about it. Show me. There's a poem that I think I got to read in Dustin's reading series, and I think that was the first time I read it anywhere, and now I can't let it go. So I'm going to read it again tonight. It's called Her Body. And last time I got a little emotional at the end when I think about my daughter growing up, the oldest one, and some of the things she's already facing as a 12-year-old, and I get a little irked when I think of, let's say, government agencies deciding things about her body. Anyway, her body. I told my daughter her body is no narrative. Her body is an ocean and a moon, and there is no freckle, no nail, no strand of hair that she is not in charge of. And that means that if we do this right, she will continue the proper revolution that leads to her lifting up the whole of our government in her hands and shaking them the way they so badly want to shake her. And if she doesn't stop until their tongues are flags in the wind, then that is her decision. Because I'm not raising an American or an Ohioan, I'm raising a girl that will become a woman, and she will know her body is whatever the fuck she decides it is. And any sail that any person tries to stick in her back to change her path will be burned in a pile I give her when she no longer needs me to write such things. It gets my blood up a little bit. The last 2 poems from the book are a good sort of synopsis of what the whole book is about. So I've been trying to read them. This is You Should Tell Me Now That You Don't Care. I told my children, you should tell me now that you don't care, that you're going to be fire starters and con artists and painters, that you will only need me for alibis. So I can let you know now that I'm your man. And if this is going to be my adventure to follow you and watch your synapses fire quickly all of the time, fire incorrectly and beautifully all of the time, then I am in. Don't hurt children. Don't steal from poor folks. Do not plagiarize anything ever. Do you hear me? Other than that, I'm willing to do a couple years in jail if it means you will get to dance around this universe like you figured something out. And this poem, when I was doing the project and writing, I think ultimately I wrote 100 or 110 of these, and took a while to figure out how to really do it. And I'd say this was maybe poem 60, 65 that I wrote while I was trying to work on it and trying to figure out exactly how to get, and if you get a chance to look at the book, you'll know there's no punctuation, no capitalization, but to get to repeat the phrases, to get to do that kind of work in the poems was one of the things that this sort of opened up the project finally into what could become a book. Because it sounds weird to say I wrote 60 poems to figure out how to put, but it took a little while as I was trying to do something different and trying to step away from, I had written those 702 Trump as a fire without light poems that became a fire without light book, and written that kind of thing for a long time. So it took me a while to figure out how to do this one. But this is the one where it all clicked. You might choose to read these poems. I told my children you might choose to read these poems in the bareness and anxiety of your young adulthood, while you search for me in the thousands and thousands of poems I have written so that I could explore, so that I could explain, so that I could hide and lie about some small terribleness. And it gives me endless joy that you will find me here, right now, as bare as you are, but feeling no anxiety at all, because I am with my children in some small way in the future, when I love you even more than I already do, because that's how real love works. It grows with the epic. It encircles the epic until you cannot tell why or how any of this began, but you know that if there is such a thing as a soul, it exists to be buoyed by moments like this. And I know I'm promoting a new book, but coming up this Monday, January 24th, it will be 10 years since my last drink. And in honor of that and a lot of the writing I've done on it, there's this 3 poems that I was thinking about how that all sort of tied together. The first one is from a manuscript that I'm still working on called Neverwell. One of the poems was just in Cortland Review not too long ago. And this is that one. It's called Neverwell number 25. I have almost 8 years of sober thoughts, and all of them curve my hips back to the past where I was a body in a basement that refused to rise because of the trauma I could not think to frame my mouth around. That partial guilt gives me what now? All the names that are tattooed on my body have propped me up for years, so maybe nobody put me in that basement. Maybe it was the safest place to be a drunk. I am the whole village fed for weeks by this temporary belief, and I confess actual hunger has started to braid me. And for anyone who's gotten to read the Emily book or heard me get to talk about it, this next poem is the poem that got it published. I mean, it was 12 years or 13 years of writing these poems, and it had been finalist for the Colorado Poetry Prize and like 4 other prizes. And then all of a sudden, I did an edit, and I got to work with Maggie Smith on sort of reordering and doing some different things. And Maggie's here in Columbus, and she's incredible. And But there was this poem the publisher told me, Gary Lovely, incredible guy, that was like, I couldn't not publish it after I read this one. And it ties together with these last three very well. Emily as a smile would have ruined the picture. There was one look, one picture of Emily in a bathtub right before we got married. She was traveling with her family. She was in Madrid or Paris or Istanbul, and she had been gone for a couple of weeks, so I had been drunk for a couple of weeks. So she sent me a picture of her in the bathtub, one breast covered, hair in a way I'd never seen before, looking directly at the faucet. And so surely did the tatters of my world collect into a whole woman so beautiful that when I got the picture, I accidentally deleted the picture. I remember it clearly though, her face, elegant, angry that she didn't have her hands wrapped around the back of my head to pull me off the bottle. She wanted to bury me in her beauty, and that almost worked too well. I am sober. I don't have that picture. I have Emily. She looks at me now. And tying all that together, and again, thank you, John. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Donna. I think the first one's going well. I think there'll be a lot more. This is fun. The last poem I'm going to read, and if you have not read Leslie Harrison's A Book of Endings, please, damn it, do. It's incredible. I spent 6 months tearing it apart and putting it back together, and I've sent her this note. She knows, and sent her this poem as a gift for that glorious 6 months where I really had trouble reading anything but that book. So this is Emily as a Book of Endings for Leslie Harrison. I chose Emily because I knew that if she chose me, I could prepare for death in a way that made my desperation to keep living something tangible. Now, with each child we have, I am cemented in the panic of the living. Now, since she keeps choosing me every morning, I am able to taunt mortality in a way that will leave claw marks in the fields of Ohio. How glorious it will be to be dragged from the living and to scream one name, to spit one name at my weakening grip, to expect the strength to return to me just like the thousands of other times I've used her name to live longer. Thank you, everybody.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, all three of you. Thank you, Darren. I hopefully think you can see why I wanted the three of you to read together. I think you complement each other quite well. And again, I think all of you do that thing where the dread and the panic of living, as Darren just said, becomes beautiful. And I think that's a real gift when you can do that with your writing. All three of you have done that. We have a few minutes if everybody's been leaving comments that I hope you've been able to see. But if anyone has a question or two for our readers, you can feel free to put it in the chat or unmute and ask. Otherwise, I will share, just kind of some comments to wrap up, and we'll respect your time and let you go on your way. But I'm just kind of waiting to see if there are any questions or comments you have for the readers. Let me know. We'll wait a minute and see if anything pops up. Okay, so one question for Rachel. Is there more to that particular essay, or was that the ending of it?
That's the ending of that essay, but it's going to weave into something larger in the full narrative.
Okay. And the narrative is a lot of it is braided, correct? Between your work at the animal hospital and other.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I could have asked for a better way to kick this off. I'm so happy I have such talented friends who said yes to number one. So what I'll do then to wrap us up, besides saying thank you again, is answer Kristen's question about when the next one. We're going to be working mostly on third Thursdays. So the next one will be February 17th. And I'll put the social media links and everything up again so you can follow. February 17th is the next reading. We'll have Han Vanderhart, Sarah Moore Wagner, and R.A. Villanueva, who hasn't read in a very long time, and I'm very excited to hear what his new work will be like. Again, if you want to follow the reading series, follow along with our schedule, who's coming up next. I just posted again all of our social media links. The soon to be have content YouTube channel after the take me probably a day or two to get that organized. And again, I do pay the readers here, so if you would like to support the series, the PayPal link is there, but no pressure. We're just happy that you were here to give these readers such a wonderful audience. You know, we had at one point 34 people, which if you've ever done poetry readings in person would be an amazing turnout for a live reading. So I was very excited to see over 30 here tonight for these wonderful people. And if you'd like to stick around for a couple minutes and unmute and chat, you're free to do so. Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording and just say thank you so much for making this first reading come to life and go so smoothly, except for me not knowing what to say at the end here. So thank you again. I'm going to stop the recording. And again, feel free to leave if you need to leave and go to sleep, or stick around and chat for a moment if you like. Thank you so much.